Hey everybody, it's Carm here. Coming to on a rather frigid Thursday evening. I think it was a high of 19 today, and it's supposed to be even colder next week with snow on the weekend, so the winter is definitely upon us here. Felt like coming on, kind of spur of the moment, actually, to do something I'd been thinking of doing for a while, but I didn't know when I'd get around to it. And it's sort of showcasing a group that I had gotten into about maybe 4 or 5 years ago, although I had known of at least one of the members for quite some time, and got into them kind of gradually, actually learning of them online and listening. The further I listened, just the more I wanted to hear and get into, and they have a really, to me, a very fascinating sound, although wonderfully strange, but I don't know if they're a group that's all that well known outside of certain circles. And by the way, we have both Fuzzies and Rocky Bubs together. He's just out of the frame here, but, coexisting for the time being. But yeah, I wanted to come on and just share some of this group for those who might not be as aware. And they're called 1A Dusseldorf. And if you're thinking of La Dusseldorf, there is a connection there. Otama Stinger, who's one half of this group, along with a fellow named Niels Christensen, was in La Dusseldorf along with his brother Klaus Stinger, which grew partly out of Neu with Mikkel Rother, who I think for the '75 album, Thomas Stinger was in that group as well. He was I think he was playing drums in that, and then he eventually switched over to other instruments like keyboards and guitars, as well as Klaus himself, taking on other instruments other than drums. So I guess he's sort of, Klaus, the older brother, took the younger brother Thomas under his wing, and this is a group that kind of, I guess, grew out of other groups that went on during the 80s and 90s. I'm not exactly sure when this group formed, but they only did, I think it was 5 releases, and it went between the years roughly 1998, 1999 till about 2002. And this one's their first one, Fedelber, which is, I believe that translates to fat liver, I think. And most of these, I think maybe all of them are on, just about all these are on the Captain Trip label out of Japan. So you can see a mixture of English and Japanese liner notes. And the artwork is done by painting by Niels Christensen. And they both play some of the same instruments, so keyboards, guitars, bass, some vocals. And yeah, I really like this artwork on here. This, there's a larger scale picture of the both of them. And most of the music of this group is very, well, it's much more avant-garde leaning than I think anything that I heard from La Dusseldorf or Neu. And you could hear some in the background. At times quite atonal. To me, I would characterize a lot of it as being like kind of a, you hear the terms like post-rock, which I guess this could be considered in part. Kind of like a techno raga, Eastern inflected, but also electroacoustic, avant-garde. There's a lot of things going on at various times. Maybe little bits of free jazz. Hard to tell really how it's composed, if at all. Maybe they're taking, just little bits of themes, or like a bare skeleton of a theme, and taking it, further and further out. Sometimes sounding much different than the original conception, and sometimes just taking like a long, just extending it out and making it, sound pretty much as it started. Now this first album, I'd say, is probably their most accessible from everything I've heard here. There's a very nice cover there, back cover. This is probably their most accessible. There's some pieces on here that almost sound more like the Berlin School with some sequencer stuff. and even at times catchier melodies, which you didn't hear a whole lot of later on, maybe just here and there. But this would probably be a good place to start. And actually, it was a tune off this album. I think it was Olala, the second piece here, that I first heard on YouTube, which made me aware of the group. So yeah, it would probably be a good place to start. Now the second one is called Koninkrijk Bilk, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. Now this one probably takes a little further out. You could hear little hints of accessible. You know, I always think of, there's times it's the shorter pieces are almost like kind of alien pop music, like if there are such a thing as. I think it's kind of a similar thing with the band Cluster. It's like almost like a alien intelligence. It heard our pop music and then kind of did their own take on it at times, but also taking it in further directions. And here's the songs. They do an interesting version of, actually it's not even really, I think it's Home on the Range, retitled Home Sweet Home. It's actually using that piece in the background, and then they kind of do little noisy things around it, little statements, I guess you could say, around it. And more with the artwork here. Yeah, to me the music has like a tone of, a kind of anarchic tone. Again, kind of playing with, you know, the barest hints of traditional song structure, sometimes more overtly than others, but the whole thing is kind of, you could say, perverted in a way. By that I mean kind of turned aside from what you'd normally expect from, you know, the standard song format. But just I find it so fascinating, just the way they put things together. I think there's a couple of tunes on here that are also on YouTube. I think the title cut is on there. Im Marzen der Bauer, I think, might be on there too. But yeah, it's another fascinating one. And the same lineup, I think, pretty much. Yeah, Otama Stinger, drum, key, guitar, bass. Niels Christensen. Someone else named Stefan Domisch on synthesizer, key, and vocal. So another thing too is the vocals, the way they kind of waft in and out of there, sort of atmospherically, almost kind of ghost-like. But very neat. Next one is DJF, which stands for, I think it's Deutsch Japan Freundschaft, or Japanese, Deutsch, German, Japanese friendship, it stands for. And that's what's playing in the background. I think it's the final cut. Hinter der Zuckerdos First Krieg, the longest piece on here. But another just kind of interesting example of what they do. You could hear kind of like the little noises in the background, the percussive noises. Maybe they even do stuff with musique concrète, or maybe in real time, you know, but they get that kind of same effect out of it. And this one, well, I didn't mention the first two. It's from 98 and 99. I think this one was from 2000. Yeah, 2000. And more with the artwork. This one actually kind of goes in a jazzier direction too. There's some saxophone on here, played by Otama Stinger himself. You can see there. This one also is probably one of their maybe harsher and more abrasive ones, at least early on. It took me a little, it was a little harder getting into this one, but again, just fascinating kind of how they, you know, play with the various sounds. Next up, we have 1A Dusseldorf Live. So, as far as I know, their one live album. They're joined on here by a singer. It's the two core members again, Thomas Stinger and Niels Christensen, joined by Victoria Vermeister. who also played in a group called Lanoy, which was Klaus Stinger, his group he had during the 80s and 90s, and maybe even a little beyond that. There's the three members there. Otama Stinger here, Victoria in the middle, and Nils on this side. And this one, kind of like the previous one, tends to go into harsher directions at times, more distorted, but also surrealistic too would be another term to describe what they're doing. And again, with the photo collages, which sometimes are kind of like a picture of the music. Some of the stuff she does with vocals are very interesting, and other times it's a little bit maybe a little bit overdone, but and for the most part really no lyrics. It's kind of her own made up, almost sounds like a made up language, which again kind of adds to the alien quality. There's Thomas Stinger there. This one's also from 2000. Another one that's probably a little more difficult to get into, but if you could get through like the first two, it's probably easier entryway. Oh, and the CD itself is interesting, the way it's the various they got the layout's really neat. Now, at some point after this album, Thomas Stinger passed away in 2002. I think he was born in 1952, and he wasn't quite 50 when he passed. I'm not sure how he passed, but it was much too young. And they did a tribute album to him. One the Dusseldorf Pyramid Blau, or Blue Pyramid. Yeah, tribute to Thomas Stinger, 1952-2002. And this album is probably their most, what you'd expect. It's really like an elegy in a way, but again done kind of in their rather surrealistic style, very unusual. But for the most part, it's a pretty quiet album, and has kind of you'd hear that kind of reverential tone, but also playful, like a lot of their other stuff in tribute to him. Oh, and here's their the aforementioned discography there, going through the years. Yeah, again, you have Nils Christensen on guitar, keys, bass, and drum. Also, this is photo and video, so he took pictures and there's video pieces. Victoria Wehrmeister on vocals again. Stefan Damisch on drum, key, and effect. And yeah, this is their. There's times on here where her vocals. There's one piece. It almost sounds like blues in a way, but again, kind of a blues from a more alien perspective. If they had heard it from up above, and it would have been their interpretation. But yeah, very very powerful final statement by the group here. And again, the artwork just really kind of a picture of the music. It has the surrealism, the whimsy, but of course on here again it has that kind of elegy-like quality. And fascinating. I think some of this is on YouTube also, which is for sampling. So yeah, this and the first two. I'd say this one and the first album. So the first and the last are probably the most accessible and easy to get into. But just a group that has fascinated me since I first heard them. And again, I'm kind of doing the spur of the moment, so I hadn't listened to much of it in a while. But from my memories of it, it's just. Yeah, it's a very unusual group. It's, and I don't think again, there's not a lot of other groups I can compare it to, even to, the groups that they are, to some degree, even if it was tenuously spawned out of, like La Dusseldorf and Neu and, a lot of the other German groups that they were connected with. They kind of really came into their own sound, by themselves, and it was just fascinating. Now here is to my knowledge, this is his only solo album, Thomas Stinger, Für mich, which is from 1982. And there he is there at that time. It also has a couple bonus cuts by 1A Dusseldorf, which is nice. This is also on a Captain Tripp. Well, I think it was reissued on Bureau B, so I'll have to check that. Maybe it, I don't know, maybe it has maybe there's bonuses on there too. Some bonus guts. And again with the the collage of pictures. Now this is much different than 1A Dusseldorf. Very melodic. He plays pretty much all the instruments on here. Very melodic, really very beautiful, and at times quite melancholy. I would highly recommend this album. I think it's in its entirety on YouTube also. It has kind of a synth pop quality, but also just very beautiful, and has that whimsy as well. But also very propulsive and rhythmic. And yeah, I don't think he made a solo album after this. I think in 2000 there might have been some kind of a compilation, but I think it might have went in and out of print pretty quick. But would definitely recommend, if you want to get into his work in general, start here and then go to either Fettelber or Pyramid Blau. And then afterwards, go into the work, proceed from there. I was really fortunate to find several of these really cheap on Discogs from the same seller. So that was kind of neat, because otherwise it would have been maybe a little harder back at the time. I don't know, maybe it's all become easier to find now. I don't know, but yeah, Otama Stinger and 1A Dusseldorf, an artist in a group worth getting into. And again, for just kind of a different side of, from what I've heard, came out of the German scene of that time, and through the years, and that area. And yeah, so yeah, just wanted to come on and do that after meaning to do it for a while, and yeah, it's worth checking out, and for something a little different. So yeah, that's about it for now. And Rocky Bubs and Fuzzies, I hope we're all doing well and keeping warm. Might have a little more downtime coming up, so I have a few other things I want to eventually get around to doing when the time comes and get everything together. So, till next time. Peace, love, and joy.